Hi everybody, how are you today? Nice to see ya. Welcome to the T4S channel here. I am reading from The Secret Teachings of All Ages, and that was written by Manly Hall. Now this part here talks about the human body and symbolism. And I just thought, it's kind of interesting. So, we're gonna share it here with you guys, and let you enjoy it too. The oldest and the most profound, the most universal of all symbols is the human body. The Greeks, Persians, Egyptians, and Hindus considered a philosophical analysis of man's triune nature to be an indispensable part of ethical and religious training. The mysteries of every nation taught that the laws, elements, and powers of the universe were epitomized in the human constitution, and that everything which existed outside of man had its analog within man. As above, so below, I would say. That's me interjecting. Continuing. The universe, being immeasurable in its immensity and inconceivable in its profundity, was beyond mortal estimation. Even the gods themselves could comprehend but a part of the inaccessible glory which was their source. When temporarily permeated with divine enthusiasm, man may transcend for a brief moment the limitations of his own personality and behold in part that celestial effulgence in which all creation is based. But even in his periods of greatest illumination, man is incapable of imprinting upon the substance of his rational soul a perfect image of the multiform expression of celestial activity. Recognizing the futility of attempting to cope intellectually with that which transcends the comprehension of the rational faculties, the early philosophers turned their attention from the inconceivable divinity to man himself, within the narrow confines of whose nature they found manifested all the mysteries of the external spheres. As a natural outgrowth of this practice, there was fabricated a secret theological system in which God was considered as the grand man, and conversely, man as the little god. I just want to interject here, for SJWs who are getting their panties in a twist here. When they're talking about man, they're talking about mankind, okay? Humans. All right, anyways, continuing this analogy, the universe was regarded as a man, and conversely, human man as a miniature universe. Definitely me interjecting here, but definitely we're talking about as above, so below. Anyways, the greater universe was termed the macrocosm, the great world or body, and the divine life or spiritual entity controlling its functions was called the macroprosophus. Man's body, or the individual human universe, was termed the microcosm, and the divine life or spiritual entity controlling its functions was called the microprosophus. The pagan mysteries were primarily concerned with instructing neophytes in the true relationship existing between the macrocosm and the microcosm. In other words, between God and man. Accordingly, the key to these analogies between the organs and functions of the microcosmic man and those of the macrocosmic man constituted the most prized possession of the early initiates. In Isis Unveiled, H.P. Blavatsky summarizes a pagan concept of man as follows. Man is a little world, a microcosm inside the great universe. Like a fetus, he is suspended by all of his three spirits in the matrix of the macrocosmos. And while his terrestrial body is in constant sympathy with its parent Earth, me interjecting, yes, the Schumann resonance is exactly the same for a human being as it is for the Earth itself. So there you go. His astral soul lives in unison with the sidereal anima mundi. He is in it as it is in him, for the world-pervading element fills all space, and is space itself, only shoreless and infinite. As to his third spirit, the divine, what is it but an infinitesimal ray, one of the countless radiations proceeding directly from the highest cause? My note, first principle. There's many names for this, okay? The spiritual light of the world. This is the trinity of organic and inorganic nature, the spiritual and the physical, which are three in one, and of which Proclus says that the first monad is the eternal God, the second eternity, the third the paradigm or pattern of the universe, the three constituting the intelligible triad. End quote. Long before the introduction of idolatry into religion, the early priests caused the statue of a man to be placed in the sanctuary of the temple. This human figure symbolized the divine power in all its intricate manifestations. Thus, the priests of antiquity accepted man as their textbook, and through the study of him, learned to understand the greater and more abstruse mysteries of the celestial scheme of which they were a part. It is not improbable that this mysterious figure standing over the primitive altars was made in the nature of a mannequin, and, like certain emblematic hands in the mystery schools, was covered with either carved or painted hieroglyphs. The statue may have opened, thus showing the relative positions of the organs, bones, muscles, nerves, and other parts. After ages of research, the mannequin became a mass of intricate hieroglyphs and symbolic figures. Every part had its secret meaning. The measurements formed a basic standard by means of which it was possible to measure all parts of the cosmos. It was a glorious composite emblem of all the knowledge possessed by the sages and hierophants. Then came the age of idolatry. The mysteries decayed from within. The secrets were lost, and none knew the identity of the mysterious man who stood over the altar. It was remembered only that the figure was a sacred and glorious symbol of universal power, and it, finally, came to be looked upon as a god, the one in whose image man was made. Having lost the knowledge of the purpose for which the mannequin was originally constructed, the priests worshipped this effigy until at last their lack of spiritual understanding brought the temple down in ruins about their heads, and the statue crumbled with the civilization that had forgotten its meaning. Proceeding from this assumption of the first theologians that man is actually fashioned in the image of God, the initiated minds of past ages erected the stupendous structure of theology upon the foundation of the human body. The religious world of today is almost totally ignorant of the fact that the science of biology is the fountainhead of its doctrines and tenets. Many of the codes and laws believed by modern divines to have been direct revelations from divinity are in reality the fruitage of ages of patient delving into the intricacies of the human constitution and the infinite wonders revealed by such a study. In nearly all the sacred books of the world can be traced an anatomical analogy. This is most evident in their creation myths. Anyone familiar with embryology and obstetrics will have no difficulty in recognizing the basis of the allegory concerning Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, the 9 degrees of the Eleusinian mysteries, and the Brahmanic legend of Vishnu's incarnations. The story of the universal egg, the Scandinavian myth of Gnugap, the dark cleft in space in which the seed of the world is sown, and the use of the fish as the emblem of the paternal generative power, all show the true origin of theological speculation. The philosophers of antiquity realized that man himself was the key to the riddle of life, for he was the living image of the divine plan, and in future ages humanity also will come to realize more fully the solemn import of those ancient words. The proper study of mankind is man. Both God and man have a twofold constitution, of which the superior part is invisible, and the inferior visible. In both, there's also an intermediary sphere marking the point where these visible and invisible natures meet. As the spiritual nature of God controls his objective universal form, which is actually a crystallized idea, so the spiritual nature of man is the invisible cause and controlling power of his visible material personality. Thus, it is evident that the spirit of man bears the same relationship to his material body that God, whatever you want to call that, bears to the objective universe. I think that the first principle is a good term, personally. The mysteries taught that spirit or life was anterior to form, and that what is anterior includes all that is posterior to itself. Spirit being anterior to form, form is therefore included within the realm of spirit. It's also a popular statement or belief that man's spirit is within his body. According to the conclusions of philosophy and theology, however, this belief is erroneous, for spirit first circumscribes an area and then manifests within it. Philosophically speaking, form, being a part of spirit, is within spirit, but spirit is more than the sum of form, as the material nature of man is therefore within the sum of spirit. So the universal nature, including the entire sidereal system, is within the all-pervading essence of God, my note, the first principle, the universal intelligence or spirit, the power that creates the universes. And I am interjecting right there. Now we're going to go on with the reading. According to another concept of the ancient wisdom, all bodies, whether spiritual or material, have three centers, called by the Greeks the upper, middle, and lower center. An apparent ambiguity will here be noted. To diagram or symbolize adequately abstract mental verities is impossible, for the diagrammatic representation of one aspect of metaphysical relationships may be an actual contradiction of some other aspect. While that which is above is generally considered superior in dignity and power, in reality, that which is in the center is superior and anterior to both that which is said to be above and that which is said to be below. Therefore, it must be said that the first, which is considered as being above, is actually in the center, while both of the others, which are said to be either above or below, are actually beneath. This point can be further simplified if the reader will consider above as indicating degree of proximity to source and below as indicating degree of distance from source, source being posited in the actual center and relative distance being the various points along the radii from the center towards the circumference. In matters pertaining to philosophy and theology, up may be considered as toward the center, and down as toward the circumference. Center is spirit, circumference is matter. Therefore, up is toward spirit along an ascending scale of spirituality, and down is toward matter along an ascending scale of materiality. The latter concept is partially or partly expressed by the apex of a cone, which, when viewed from above, is seen as a point in the exact center of the circumference formed by the base of the cone. These three universal centers, the one above, the one below, and the link uniting them, represent three suns, or three aspects of one sun, centers of effulgence. These also have their analogues in the three grand centers of the human body, which, like the physical universe, is a demiurgic fabrication. The first of these suns, says Thomas Taylor, is analogous to light, when viewed subsisting in its fountain, the sun. The second to the light immediately proceeding from the sun, and the third to the splendor communicated to other natures by this light. Since the superior or spiritual center is in the midst of the other two, its analog in the physical body is the heart, the most spiritual and mysterious organ in the human body. The second center, or the link between the superior and inferior worlds, is elevated to the position of greatest physical dignity, the brain. The third or lower center is relegated to the position of least physical dignity but greatest physical importance, the generative system. Thus, the heart is symbolically the source of life, the brain the link by which, through rational intelligence, life and form are united. I'm going to interject there. It's really interesting because I remember reading some kind of study where they were talking about how, what was it? Basically that the heart is actually like a second brain in our bodies. And yeah, it's very interesting. You should look that up yourselves. Just look it up. The heart is a brain and see what you find. All right. Life and form are united, and the generative system, or infernal creator, the source of that power by which physical organisms are produced. The ideals and aspirations of the individual depend largely upon which of these three centers of power predominates in scope and activity of expression. In the materialist, the lower center is the strongest. In the intellectualist, the higher center. But in the initiate, the middle center, by bathing the two extremes in a flood of spiritual effulgence, controls wholesomely both the mind and the body. As light bears witness of life, which is its source, so the mind bears witness of the spirit, and activity in a still lower plane bears witness of intelligence. Thus the mind bears witness of the heart, while the generative system in turn bears witness of the mind. Accordingly, the spiritual nature is most commonly symbolized by a heart, the intellectual power by an opened eye. That makes me interject to say, that symbol of the eye of Ra, for example, right? The eye. Okay, and then symbolizing the pineal gland or cyclopean eye, which is the two-faced Janus of the pagan mysteries, and the generative system by a flower, a staff, a cup, or a hand. While all the mysteries recognize the heart as the center of spiritual consciousness. I'm going to interject there and say, I think that's really interesting because, Satan does say, my wisdom is not separate from my heart. And when I read that he'd said that, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the most profound thing. I think it's the most profound thing that he said. And so I'm finding this very, very interesting. The heart is the center of spiritual consciousness. See, I'm interjecting again here, but a lot of people that are trying to really get into the occult, and whether it's into Satanism or whatever, right? They really think, if you want to really get into your spiritual consciousness, you got to open that third eye, right? And so here they're saying, no, it's the heart. That's interesting. Okay. They often purposely ignored this concept and used the heart in its exoteric sense as the symbol of the emotional nature. Which, I'm interjecting here, but that really is like a very surface and almost obfuscation of what the heart really actually is, right? Ooh, love, ooh, ooh, it's all just emotion. It's like, no, it's much more than that, right? Okay, anyway. In this arrangement, the generative center represented the physical body, the heart, the emotional body, and the brain, the mental body. The brain represented the superior sphere, but after the initiates had passed through the lower degrees, they were instructed that the brain was the proxy of the spiritual flame dwelling in the innermost recesses of the heart. The student of esotericism discovers ere long that the ancients often resorted to various blinds to conceal the true interpretations of their mysteries. So true. So true. You know, the more that I've studied it, the more you find out, oh, that was just, okay, that's almost like a cover story, but it really means this. The substitution of the brain for the heart was one of those blinds. The 3 degrees of the ancient mysteries were, with few exceptions, given in chambers which represented the 3 great centers of the human and universal bodies. If possible, the temple itself was constructed in the form of a human body. The candidate entered between the feet and received the highest degree in the point corresponding to the brain. Thus, the first degree was the material mystery, and its symbol was the generative system. It raised the candidate through the various degrees of concrete thought. The second degree was given, this is making me think of the Great Pyramid, right? The second degree was given in the chamber corresponding to the heart, the Grand Gallery. Anyway, but represented the middle power, which was the mental link. Here the candidate was initiated into the mysteries of abstract thought and lifted as high as the mind was capable of penetrating. He then passed into the third chamber, which, analogous to the brain, occupied the highest position in the temple, but, analogous to the heart, was of the greatest dignity. In the brain chamber, the heart mystery was given. Right? I'm thinking about, would that be the king's chamber or the queen's chamber? Anyway, sorry. Can't help, gets my brain going, right? Here the initiate for the first time truly comprehended the meaning of those immortal words. Ha ha! As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Very true. As there are 7 hearts in the brain, so there are 7 brains in the heart. And this is a matter of superphysics of which little can be said at the present time. So he's just scratched the surface there. Proclus writes on this subject in the first book of On the Theology of Plato. Indeed, Socrates in the Alcibiades rightly observes that the soul, entering into herself, will behold all other things and deity itself, verging to her own union and to the center of all life, laying aside multitude and the variety of the all-manifold powers that she contains. She ascends to the highest watchtower offerings, and as in the most holy of the mysteries they say that the mystics at first meet with the multiform and many-shaped genera which are hurled forth before the gods, but on entering the temple unmoved and guarded by the mystic rites, they genuinely receive in their bosom, in the heart, divine illumination, and divested of their garments, as they would say, participate of a divine nature. The same mode, as it appears to me, takes place in the speculation of wholes. For the soul, when looking at things posterior to herself, beholds the shadows and images of beings, but when she converts herself to herself, she evolves her own essence and the reasons which she contains. And at first, indeed, she only, as it were, beholds herself, but when she penetrates more profoundly into the knowledge of herself, she finds in herself both intellect and the orders of beings. When, however, she proceeds into her interior recesses and into the adytum, as it were, of the soul, she perceives with her eyes closed, in brackets it says, without the aid of the lower mind, the genus of the gods and the unities of beings. For all things are in us psychically, and through this we are naturally capable of knowing all things, by exciting the powers and the images of wholes which we contain. All the knowledge, and me interjecting here, right? All that knowledge is within. You go within and you find it psychically. And we are naturally capable of knowing all things because we have a natural inborn connection to that first principle or God source or quantum field, whatever you want to call it, the power that can create universes. So that's interesting. The initiates of old warned their disciples that an image is not a reality, but merely the objectification of a subjective idea. The image of the gods were not designed to be objects of worship, but were to be regarded merely as emblems or reminders of invisible powers and principles. Similarly, the body of man must not be considered as the individual, but only as the house of the individual, in the same manner that the temple was the house of the gods, or God. In a state of grossness and perversion, man's body is the tomb or prison of a divine principle. In a state of unfoldment and regeneration, it is the house or sanctuary of the deity by whose creative power it was fashioned. That makes sense to me. Personality suspended upon a thread from the nature of being, declares the secret work. Man is essentially a permanent and immortal principle. Only his bodies pass through the cycle of birth and death. The immortal is the reality. The mortal is the unreality. During each period of earth life, reality thus dwells in unreality, to be liberated from it temporarily by death and permanently by illumination. While generally regarded as polytheists, the pagans gained this reputation not because they worshipped more than one god, but rather because they personified the attributes of this god, thereby creating a pantheon of posterior deities, each manifesting a part of what the one god manifests as a whole. The various pantheons of ancient religions therefore actually represent the catalogued and personified attributes of deity. All the gods and goddesses of antiquity consequently have their analogies in the human body, as have also the elements, planets, and constellations which were assigned as proper vehicles for these celestials. 4 body centers are assigned to the elements, the 7 vital organs to the planets, the 12 principal parts and members to the zodiac, the invisible parts of man's divine nature to various supermundane deities, while the hidden God was declared to manifest through the marrow in the bones. It's difficult for many to realize that they are actual universes, that their physical bodies are a visible nature through the structure of which countless waves of evolving life are unfolding their latent potentialities. Yet through man's physical body not only are a mineral, a plant, and an animal kingdom evolving, but also unknown classifications and divisions of invisible spiritual life. Yeah, me interject, that is true, actually. Just as cells are infinitesimal units in the structure of man, so man is an infinitesimal unit in the structure of the universe. A theology based upon the knowledge and appreciation of these relationships is as profoundly just as it is profoundly true. As man's physical body has 5 distinct and important extremities, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head, of which the last governs the first 4, the number 5 has been accepted as the symbol of man. I have to interject there. It's also known as the star pattern, right? And that, again, makes me think of Da Vinci's, can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but, you know, he sketched that man who was inside of a star shape. Yeah, so anyway, that's, yeah, right? Pentacle, pentagram, whatever. By its 4 corners, the pyramid symbolizes the arms and legs, and by its apex, the head, thus indicating that one rational power, very interesting. And I'd said this is making me think of the Great Pyramid. Well, there you go. By its four corners, the pyramid symbolizes the arms and legs, and by its apex, the head, thus indicating that one rational power controls four irrational corners. The hands and feet are used to represent the four elements, of which the 2 feet are earth and water, and the 2 hands, fire and air. The brain then symbolizes the sacred 5th element, ether, which controls and unites the other 4. If the feet are placed together and the arms outspread, man then symbolizes a cross with the rational intellect as the head or upper limb. The fingers and toes also have special significance. The toes represent the 10 commandments of the physical law, and the fingers the 10 commandments of the spiritual law. The 4 fingers of each hand represent the 4 elements, and the 3 phalanges of each finger represent the divisions of the element, so that in each hand there are 12 parts to the fingers, which are analogous to the signs of the zodiac, whereas the 2 phalanges and base of each thumb signify the threefold deity. The first phalange corresponds to the creative aspect, the second to the preservative aspect, and the base to the generative and destructive aspect. When the hands are brought together, the result is the 24 elders and the 6 days of creation. That's interesting. In symbolism, the body is divided vertically into halves. The right half is considered as light and the left half as dark or darkness. By those unacquainted with the true meanings of light and darkness, the light half was denominated spiritual and the left half material. Light is the symbol of objectivity, darkness of subjectivity. Light is a manifestation of life and is therefore posterior to life. That which is anterior to light is darkness, in which light exists temporarily, but darkness permanently. As life precedes light, its only symbol is darkness, and darkness is considered as the veil which must eternally conceal the true nature of abstract and undifferentiated being. In ancient times, men fought with their right arms and defended the vital centers with their left, on which was carried the protecting shield. The right half of the body was regarded therefore as offensive and the left defensive. For this reason also, the right side of the body was considered masculine and the left side feminine. Several authorities are of the opinion that the present prevalent right-handedness of the race is the outgrowth of the custom of holding the left hand in restraint for defensive purposes. Furthermore, as the source of being is in the primal darkness which preceded light, so the spiritual nature of man is in the dark part of his being, for the heart is on the left side. Among the curious misconceptions arising from the false practice of associating darkness with evil is one by which several early nations used the right hand for all constructive labors, and the left hand for only those purposes termed unclean and unfit for the sight of the gods. For the same reason, black magic was often referred to as the left-hand path, and heaven was said to be upon the right and hell upon the left. Some philosophers further declared that there were 2 methods of writing, one from left to right, which was considered the exoteric method, and the other from right to left, which was considered esoteric. The exoteric writing was that which is done out or away from the heart, while the esoteric writing was that which was written towards the heart. The secret doctrine declares that every part and member of the body is epitomized in the brain, and, in turn, that all that is in the brain is epitomized in the heart. In symbolism, the human head is frequently used to represent intelligence and self-knowledge. As the human body in its entirety is the most perfect known product of the Earth's evolution, it was employed to represent divinity the highest appreciable state or condition. Artists attempting to portray divinity often show only a hand emerging from an impenetrable cloud. I'm going to interject there. That's very interesting because I see that symbol showing up in the tarot. So, yeah, that's really interesting. The cloud signifies the unknowable divinity concealed from man by human limitation. The hand signifies the divine activity, the only part of God that is cognizable to the lower senses. The face consists of a natural trinity, the eyes representing the spiritual power that comprehends, the nostrils representing the preservative and vivifying power, and the mouth and ears representing the material demiurgic power of the lower world. The first sphere is eternally existent and is creative. The second sphere pertains to the mystery of the creative breach, and the third sphere, the third sphere to the creative world. There's a lot of notes in here, and I had to jump over them in order to keep going on this paragraph. By the word of God, the material universe was fabricated, and the 7 creative powers, or vowel sounds, which have been brought into existence by the speaking of the word, became the 7 Elohim, or deities, by whose power administration the lower world was organized. Occasionally the deity is symbolized by an ear, an eye, a nose, or a mouth. By the first, divine awareness, that would be the eye. By the eye, divine awareness is signified by the ear, divine interest, by the nose, divine vitality, and by the fourth, the mouth, divine command. Okay, I'm going to jump back over here and see, what is this? There's a lot of notes here. So there's a picture here that says the threefold life of the inner man. Johann Georg Gitschel, a profound philosopher and mystic, the most illuminated of the disciples of Jacob Boehme, secretly circulated the above diagrams among a small group of devoted friends and students. Gitschel republished the writings of Boehme, illustrating them with numerous remarkable figures. According to Gitschel, diagrams above represent the anatomy of the divine or inner man, and graphically set forth its condition during its human, infernal, and divine states. The plates in the William Law edition of Boehme's works are based apparently on Gitschel's diagrams, which they follow in all essentials. Gitschel gives no detailed description of his figures, and the lettering on the original diagrams, here translated out of the German, is the only clue to the interpretation of the charts. The 2 end figures represent the obverse and reverse of the same diagram and are termed Table 3. They are designed to show the condition of the whole man as to all his 3 essential parts, spirit, soul, and body, in his regenerated state. The 3rd figure from the left is called the second table, and sets forth the condition of man in his old, lapsed, and corrupted state, without any respect to or consideration of his renewing by regeneration. The 3rd figure, however, does not correspond with the first table of William Law. The first table presumably represents the condition of humanity before the fall, but the Gitschel plate pertains to the 3rd or regenerated state of mankind. William Law thus describes the purpose of the diagrams and the symbols upon them. These 3 tables are designed to represent man in his different threefold state. The first before his fall in purity, dominion, and glory. The second after his fall in pollution and perdition. And the third in his rising from the fall, or on the way of regeneration, in sanctification and tendency to his last perfection. The student of Orientalism will immediately recognize in the symbols upon the figures the Hindu chakras, or centers of spiritual force, the various motions and aspects of which reveal the condition of the disciple's internal divine nature. Okay, and then we're going back to the main body of the text here. The ancients did not believe that spirituality made men either righteous or rational, but rather that righteousness and rationality made men spiritual. That's deep. That's interesting. Yeah, spirituality doesn't make men or humans righteous or rational, but rather righteousness and rationality make humans spiritual. I agree. The mysteries taught that spiritual... what was that? The mysteries taught that spiritual illumination... Something just moved all by itself. Taught that spiritual illumination was attained only by bringing the lower nature up to a certain standard of efficiency and purity. The mysteries were therefore established for the purpose of unfolding the nature of man according to certain fixed rules, which, when faithfully followed, elevated the human consciousness to a point where it was capable of cognizing its own constitution and the true purpose of its existence. Interesting. This knowledge of how man's manifold constitution could be most quickly and most completely regenerated to the point of spiritual illumination constituted the secret or esoteric doctrine of antiquity. So I'm just kind of still mentally hovering over this thing here where it says elevating the human consciousness to the point where it's capable of recognizing what its true purpose of existence is. And that just made me flash to Satan, where he was talking about the true meaning and purpose of your life is to advance yourself, and thereby by doing so you advance everybody else around you and you make the universe a better place. And that's what he was saying. I know I just paraphrased that. That's not a quote. But it just made me think of that. Okay. Certain apparently physical organs and centers are in reality the veils or sheaths of spiritual centers. What these were and how they could be unfolded was never revealed to the unregenerate, for the philosophers realized that once he understood the complete working of any system, a man may accomplish a prescribed end without being qualified to manipulate and control the effects which he's produced. Basically, I think what that means is that, they aren't going to give you the matches until you know how to use them properly, because otherwise, even a child can set a house on fire, right? For this reason, long periods of probation were imposed so that the knowledge of how to become as the gods might remain in the sole possession of the worthy. Lest that knowledge be lost, however, it was concealed in allegories and myths that were meaningless to the profane, but self-evident to those acquainted with that theory of personal redemption, which was the foundation of philosophical theology. All right, so now he's interjecting something about Christianity, and I just paused for a minute to look at it, and I'm just like, ugh. Okay, I'll read it anyways because it's here. Christianity itself may be cited as an example. The entire New Testament is in fact an ingeniously concealed exposition of the secret processes of human regeneration. The characters so long considered as historical men and women are really the personification of certain processes that take place in the human body when man begins the task of consciously liberating himself from the bondage of ignorance and death. Well, if you say so. Okay. The garments and ornamentations supposedly worn by the gods are also keys, for in the mysteries clothing was considered as synonymous with form. The degree of spirituality or materiality of the organisms was signified by the quality, beauty, and value of the garments worn. Man's physical body was looked upon as the robe of his spiritual nature, and consequently the more developed were his supersubstantial powers, the more glorious his apparel. Of course, clothing was originally worn for ornamentation rather than protection. and such practice still prevails among many primitive people. The mysteries taught that man's only lasting adornments were his virtues and worthy characteristics, that he was clothed in his own accomplishments and adorned by his attainments. Thus, the white robe was symbolic of purity, the red of sacrifice and love, the blue of altruism and integrity. Since the body was said to be the robe of the spirit, mental or moral deformities were depicted as deformities of the body. Considering man's body as the measuring rule of the universe, the philosophers declared that all things resemble in constitution, if not in form, the human body. The Greeks, for example, declared Delphi to be the navel of the earth, for the physical planet was looked upon as a gigantic human being twisted into the form of a ball. In contradistinction to the belief of Christendom that the earth is an inanimate thing, the pagans considered not only the earth, but also all the sidereal bodies as individual creatures possessing individual intelligences. They even went so far as to view the various kingdoms of nature as individual entities. The animal kingdom, for example, was looked upon as one being, a composite of all the creatures composing that kingdom. This prototypic beast was a mosaic embodiment of all animal propensities, and within its nature the entire animal world existed as the human species exists within the constitution of the prototypic Adam. In the same manner, races, nations, tribes, religions, states, communities, and cities were viewed as composite entities, each made up of varying numbers of individual units. Every community has an individuality which is the sum of the individual attitudes of its inhabitants. That's true. Every religion is an individual whose body is made up of a hierarchy and vast host of individual worshippers. The organization of any religion represents its physical body and its individual members, the cell life making up this organism. Accordingly, religions, races, and communities, like individuals, pass through Shakespeare's 7 ages. For the life of man is a standard by which the perpetuity of all things is estimated. According to the secret doctrine, man, through the gradual refinement of his vehicles and the ever-increasing sensitiveness resulting from that refinement, is gradually overcoming the limitations of matter and disentangling himself from his mortal coil. When humanity has completed its physical evolution, the empty shell of materiality left behind will be used by other life waves as stepping stones to their own liberation. The trend of man's evolutionary growth is ever towards his own essential selfhood. At the point of deepest materialism, therefore, man is at the greatest distance from himself. According to the mystery teachings, not all the spiritual nature of man incarnates in matter. The spirit of man is diagrammatically shown as an equilateral triangle with one point downward. This lower point, which is 1/3 of the spiritual nature, but in comparison to the dignity of the other two is much less than 1/3, descends into the illusion of material existence for a brief space of time. That which never clothes itself in the sheath of matter is the hermetic anthropos, the overman, analogous to the Cyclops or guardian demon of the Greeks, the angel of Jacob Boehme, and the oversoul of Emerson, that unity, that oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other. At birth, only 1/3 part of the divine nature of man temporarily disassociates itself from its own immortality and takes upon itself the dream of physical birth and existence. Animating with its own celestial enthusiasm, a vehicle composed of material elements, part of and bound to the material sphere. At death, this incarnated part awakens from the dream of physical existence and reunites itself once more with its eternal condition. This periodic descent of spirit into matter is termed the wheel of life and death, and the principles involved are treated at length by the philosophers under the subject of metempsychosis. By initiation into the mysteries in a certain process known as operative theology, this law of birth and death is transcended, and during the course of physical existence, that part of the spirit which is asleep in form is awakened without the intervention of death, the inevitable initiator, and is consciously reunited with the anthropos, or the overshadowing substance of itself. This is at once the primary purpose and the consummate achievement of the mysteries, that man shall become aware of and consciously be reunited with the divine source of himself without tasting of physical dissolution. Fucking A. And that brings us up to pretty much the top of the hour, and that concludes that portion of the reading. Yeah. Well, that was damned interesting. I hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. And thanks for listening. I appreciate all of you that do, and I hope that you learned stuff and enjoyed yourself. And yeah, thanks for being here with me today and taking a little bit of your precious time to spend it with me. And I'll be back again to read some more with you. Yeah, soon. So until I see you again back here, have a great weekend or a terrific week, and look after yourself, and bye for now. Bye, guys. Bye for now.